Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. We're really excited to be joined by Robert Bedner, who recently presented at Future Plymouth 2030 and also with Dusty Gedge at Greater Green event, which he's going to talk about in a bit. I'm just going to touch on. But Robert's founder of Cura Design. It's an architectural practice which designs with sustainability at the forefront of everything they do. Cura Design have been in practice for over 14 years and completed over 150 projects across the southwest of the UK, London, abroad, and they provide architectural design and research services for residential, commercial, healthcare, as well as cultural projects. And it's all to do with our relationship with nature as the core design value. It's also the driver and generator for creating a new type of built environment. Robert, many thanks for joining us today.
Yes, it's my pleasure. What a great series to be part of.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Thanks so much. I wonder could you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, I've just touched on something of what you do, but I've also noticed you're a chartered architectural technologist, which I think is a brilliant title. So can you tell me a little about yourself and a bit about what that is, please?
Okay. I think what I'll do is I'll just I'll backpedal a little bit. Basically from the States, as a kid, I was always into making places and nature, camping and things like that.
Yeah.
So I was interested in architecture from an early age, and when I was at architecture school in St. Louis, I became a little bit disillusioned, and I read a book by an architect named Sverre Fehn called The Thought of Construction. And Fehn was a great architect based in Norway, and ended up getting the Pritzker Prize for architecture. And when I read his book, I remembered that Jørn Utzon had worked his way across on a ship from Denmark to work for Frank Lloyd Wright. So I did the same thing in reverse, basically. I worked my way on an oil tanker from the States over to Norway to knock on Sverre Fehn's door after I read his book. And so I was really lucky. He hired me, and it was just the two of us in his office for almost a year. And then I went on a study trip that he had done with Jørn Utzon down to Morocco. So I took the train, the Interrail at the time, all the way from Oslo down to the Atlas and Anti-Atlas Mountains in Morocco to look at the architecture down there that had inspired Fehn when he was about my age. So basically did this whole sort of trip with Fehn and everything. Then I was lucky enough to work for Renzo Piano in Paris for a good sort of 6 months on a fantastic project in Italy, which was the Finispol Sistiana project with Peter Rice. We did this incredible tent structure covering a abandoned quarry on the water there. And then after that, I ended up in New York City working with Storefront for Art and Architecture with Kyung Park and Shirin Nishad at the time. And I was lucky because when I was there, I got to work with Vito Acconci and Stephen Hull on the new facade. So those sort of three things led me to sort of think about architecture in different ways. Yeah. And after that, I worked with Tom Hennis at Think Design, who they just finished the memorial for the for everything, for the 9/11.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of exhibit designing and a very creative office. And then I found myself back in Plymouth, and I was teaching a little bit at the University of Plymouth, and there's a possibility of writing a book. And I had kept notes. Well, I kept a huge journal when I was working for Fehn in Norway, a 600-page journal of what it was like working for this great architect. Yeah. And so I wanted to use all that material and write a book. And so the university was going to help with that. And I was going to call the book Birthright. And before I chose that title, I thought, well, I better go online and make sure that nobody else has done a book called Birthright. And sure enough, Stephen Kellert, the year before, had written this book called Birthright. And not only had he, used the title, but it was basically whatever, very close to where, my thoughts had come to with architecture and the way that architecture can, engage with nature. And really from that point forward, it's about, for me, it's been about trying to find a voice, an architectural voice. With the kind of design that I'm doing and with the way that it engages with nature. And so when I came back here, I went through the process of becoming a chartered architectural technologist versus working as an architect. And it just, basically, I got pushed into that direction by the way the system works here. Okay. A chartered technologist is basically a person who's into the technology of how a building is put together. Okay. So it's the technical aspect of architecture, and there are some technologists that are very, very good at designing buildings, and some that are better at detailing buildings, and it's a little bit like there's some architects that are very esoteric and very sort of airy-fairy, and then there's other people that are more hands-on and more detail oriented, and so so that's basically how I came about to have a qualification and in the industry. Yeah. And that led to basically doing my New Street project, which got some awards from the Institute of Architectural Technology. It got into grand designs. I got some attention also I got an award from the Abercrombie Award here in Plymouth, which they only do every 4 years. They hand out some awards for the architecture in the city. And I've been lucky to get that 3 times. And so I also got the Abercrombie for the Children's Theater that I did here, and as well the Union Corner Community Center. And all of that is, again, it's been steadily sort of developing the biophilic side of things. Yeah. Should I keep going on about this?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to touch on it. Well, there's so many things that we could just talk about, just what you just spoke about, actually, for like the whole, for an hour, easy. Yeah. Really, you mentioned you went to Morocco. I mean, I thought it was such a lovely thing that you kind of did that in reverse, and you went on the tanker to him, and you kind of, and then you went down to Morocco, and then you studied with Renzo Piano. I mean, what an amazing thing. And then off to New York and then the sort of just, I mean, fantastic, absolutely. And then the awards that you've won is wonderful. I went to Morocco and I went to the Atlas Mountains as well, and there was something about the earth there and the indigenous, or not, you can't say that, but the local building, the local methodology way of building. And we went inside one of the houses, and we had tea. We had mint tea with them, and that actually with the Bedouin, and just it was wonderful. I mean, just to experience a cool house in that heat. I know it's sheltered from the wind and the way it was designed, but using local earth. And
Fehn wrote a beautiful, it's on, you can probably find it online, a beautiful essay about when he went down there as a student with Jorn Utzon. They went down together. But what they don't talk about is they stayed with the military on military bases playing tennis and stuff. You know, I didn't do that. I had a backpack and, you know, got on buses and hitchhiked. But you know, basically, he said some really beautiful things, and like you know, the architecture there, when you go back, it's like going back in time. It's the way they built the mountain houses hasn't changed in 2,000 years. So if you want to look at architecture from a primitive, you know, like where did it all start? That's where he got his inspiration, and it's this, and that ultimately that came from Corbusier, because Corbusier went down there. So with his mosaic architecture. So he was sort of following Corbusier, and then I was sort of following him and Jorn Utzon. Just, you know, stories about they would use spit to instead of a plumb bob, you know, to make sure things are straight. And that, you know, in Morocco, he talked about the fact that, you know, if there wasn't a bridge, you just had to wait for the water to recede, and then that's when you would, you know, cross the river. You know, beautiful, really poetic ways of thinking about what life is all about.
Yeah, and working with nature, isn't it? It's working with the rhythms of nature.
Exactly. Yeah, the rhythms. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, not fighting it, not fighting it, but using it, you know, and living with it, isn't it? Really, or respecting and honoring the energy and the movements and the power of nature. And it was there first, so we should be building with that sensitivity. I mean, I would love to talk to you about the Renzo Piano thing, and I think I'm going to have to get you back on to talk about that and different other projects and textures.
Oh, that's okay.
and fractals and all that malarkey, which is all kind of all in all that sort of thing. Oh, it's beautiful. I went to the thing at the Royal Academy, the Renzo Piano, and it was just, I could have spent hours, well, I did spend actually quite too long on the model of the city and stuff, and it was just, yeah, absolutely stunning. But just coming back to you, obviously, your journey into sort of biophilic design, you've touched on all these different aspects. I mean, was there like a sort of a revelation? I mean, you mentioned the Kellert book. Was that kind of like one of the things, like, oh,
it all sort of dovetailed. You know, it's sort of dovetailed from Stephen Kellert's book, because I've always, up to that point, I'd been struggling to find words. When people try and get you to talk about, oh, what kind of design do you do? You know, what do you think architecture is all about? Or how did you come up with this design? It's you've got to suddenly come up with a language and a way of talking about buildings. And what struck me about A Birthright, you know, the book, was, okay, here was somebody who's really sort of saying it's about nature. It's about a love of nature and the way that the building relates to the land and the sky. It's really the same thing that Sverre Fehn was talking about. If you read The Thought of Construction, it's a very, although his is a little bit more esoteric, a little bit more poetic, but they're really talking, in my mind, they're talking about the same thing. And it's also like Frank Lloyd Wright. It's the same kind of language and feeling about the way construction can relate to nature. So you know, that basically reading that book made a difference. Probably not quite as much as The Thought of Construction. I think The Thought of Construction was really close to my heart, but it was just sort of one more step towards, you know, that direction. And then we were all hit with all of the loss of biodiversity and the Extinction Rebellion and all of this kind of stuff. Trying to really look at architecture, you know, with sort of fresh eyes and again, it's just sort of part of this this journey that I've been going on. Basically, it's like you have with Martin Heidegger, the philosopher, he basically was. If you read The Thought of Construction, they talk about Martin Heidegger, and what Martin Heidegger said, and this was just after World War II, was that it was the reduction of the natural world to resources, which was the crisis of our time. And because of the way people were thinking of nature as a resource, you would have the loss of the sacred, the violation of nature, the destruction of the earth. So that all started just after World War II. And at the same time, Fehn was talking about the most basic thing you can do as an architect is to go on a walk in the woods, and the way that your footsteps crush the grass and make a mark in the landscape is sort of the most elemental way that an architect expresses themselves, and so it's sort of this violence against nature in a way that you've got to come to terms with. So that all sort of goes into I think goes into the mix of just, okay, how are we going to design this place? How are we not going to make things worse? How are we going to make things better? And with biophilic design, you can actually enhance and protect nature while you're doing the building. And of course, you've got all of the well-being, all of the wellness that's connected with, the more that we're connected with nature, it's better for our bodies, it's better for our spirits. It's this whole sort of way of thinking about what's life all about to begin with. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, you obviously Martin Heidegger, and you forget. I mean, it's like World War II. I mean, that's a long time ago, and we're still, we're still screwing it up. I mean, this is what's really exciting, I think, about biophilic design being such a strong movement across so many different disciplines. As it was saying earlier, but we're all pulling together, we're all doing what we can do. And I think, architecture plays such a key role in our built environment, in our everyday lives, whether that's, designing a hospital, whether it's designing a school, whether it's a home, whether it's a shed, we all have a choice, and bridges and all sorts of things. We have a choice about how we can design. And you just mentioned, how are we going to make things better? As an architect, as somebody who's creating things, you're thinking about the design, you're thinking about the aesthetics, you're thinking about the human-centered approach, you're thinking about all these things, the users, the movement, all these different elements that you need to know about. But you've just made such a thing there. How are we going to make things better? And you have an opportunity to do that. And I just want to say your company is called Cura Design.
Yeah.
And can you tell us why you called it Cura Design?
Well, basically, the word cura, it has to do with it's sort of a Spanish Portuguese word, and it has to do with becoming sound, healthy, becoming sound and healthy again. Mm-hmm. So that's this idea that it's almost like going into a brownfield site and saying, okay, how are we going to make this place sound and healthy again? So it's this idea of reconnecting with nature to protect and enhance nature, and also curing ourselves, our ways of thinking and our ways of dealing with being alive on the earth. And then probably as a footnote, if I'm to be really honest, part of it has to do with I was involved a little bit with plant medicine, and cura is something that the word cura comes up in the sort of plant medicine ceremonies, the plant medicine world, and it's very. I find that there's a consistent language between that world and with biophilic design. They're really talking about the same things. It's not rocket science. It really is just how do we relate to our surroundings?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do we relate to nature, the sky, the earth, the water? Are these things that we take for granted, or are they? Is there something more to them? You know, are you it also has to do with this idea of well, I mean, I'll digress a little bit. On my Twitter account, George Monbiot, it sort of had this thing where he said he was sort of fed up, and he wrote this very long thread about everything that's wrong with the world and just giving up. I mean, just sort of totally, I'm fed up with it, basically. As the great environmentalist that he is, and he said, if anybody has any ideas about what we should be doing, I'd be love to know, because I've had it, type of thing. And what I responded to, and it got a lot of positive, a lot of likes. What I said is if people can stop thinking of the world as a resource and think of it more as caretaking, shepherding, taking care of the world, and gratitude, and just valuing nature, valuing the sky, valuing the sun, valuing the trees and the birds. These aren't just things that you sell. These have a deeper connection to what makes us human, to why we're here. If people can get more, see the world more like that, then the rest will follow. We'll start taking care of the earth, basically. Yeah. And so that got an awful lot of that's it. That's the answer.
Yeah.
But I mean, how you actually come about to do that is it's walking the walk versus sort of talking the talk.
And obviously that's where biophilic design comes in, isn't it? That's why designing biophilically is really important. I mean, maybe we could sort of touch on why you consider, because I know you're part of the the sort of Future Plymouth. You're involved in that. You're speaking at the different events and things. But why do you think it's? I mean, obviously it's really obvious. But why do you think? Just to hear your passion really about this. Why do you think it's important for cities to consider designing biophilically now more than ever? I mean, you've touched on it.
I mean, it's just the future of urban design, and it's being seen all around the world. If you look at Singapore, if you look at the projects that Stefano Bolero is doing in Genoa and Cancun, it's all about the one consistent thread, other than the carbon issues, is bringing nature back into the urban environment, for all of the reasons that we're really that we're talking about. It's good for biodiversity and it's healthy for people. Just to do simple things like green roofs, which Dusty Gedge was talking about. It does so much for the wildlife. It does so much towards bringing the temperature down in the middle of cities. It does so much towards insulating the roof. They're even doing this in New York City. At the Javits Center, they put a green roof, and when they do things in New York, it's not just greenwash. They only do a multi-million-pound green roof because it's saving them money, and it's not a PR exercise or anything else. It's good for the environment, it's good for the building, and people like being up there. Yeah. So it's like a no-brainer, really, from that point of view. And Plymouth is ideal for it because it was all designed after the World War II. And after World War II, what the Germans didn't blow up, the developers tried to flatten most of Plymouth. They really had to fight to keep the Barbican, which is sort of the real historic center of the city. But anyway, when they did the Abercrombie plan and they built all of these fantastic 1950s buildings, the usual thing happened. They ran out of money. And so a lot of the buildings, they just built the facades. And it's a little bit like if you go behind the buildings in Plymouth on the major streets, you'll see that they all have this sort of ziggurat where they go down. So they built a facade, and then it's literally just a wall. And then it goes out one floor and then out another floor and sawtooths out into a parking lot in the back. And so basically, because they did things like that, they were always intending to continue building behind the buildings, and they put big pieces of steel, and it's all flat roofs. So it's ideal for green roofs. It's ideal for bringing that back into the city. Mm. And Plymouth is just another one of these parts of it's a seaside town, really. That if you go to Plymouth, after 6 o'clock, it is completely dead. I mean, it's like St. Louis, where I went to university. It's sort of a commuter thing, where people come into work and then their students are really the life of the town after dark. Mm. But the other thing that's happened is all of the first floor elements of the buildings here are used as storage, so if you did put green roofs on, you could convert those first floors into apartments, and then you could have allotments and all of the parking lots they've put behind these buildings. Could be amazing. It could be really, really good. So that's what I've been trying to push with the powers that be here.
Right, it's that you're making inroads, just keep banging the drum, and that's what a lovely concept that, like you're saying, I mean, there's issues as well with housing, affordable housing, how you fit so many people into a city and all this sort of thing. Like you're saying, being able to create a beautiful green roof will entice people to come into the cities and live in the cities, which will then bring life into the cities and community, and then safety and security and all this stuff, and all the magic happens, doesn't it, when people talk to each other and then ideas happen. And it's just brilliant. I mean, having honeybees or whatever else that you could put on the top there as well. You get your fresh honey, with your tea in the morning. It's like, it's all good. It's a win-win. Yeah. It's totally a win-win.
It's happening in Paris and New York. These farms that are happening in the cities where they're doing high-rise farms, and they're doing farms in Paris. They're looking at doing one underground. Okay. And so the restaurants, when you have your salad, it literally is from the same place. Yeah. And it's sort of like we keep saying, it's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. Do you have any transformations particularly that you've seen, like a case study or something? Have you sort of one that you'd like to share? Any particular one that really sort of stands out to you that's like, ooh, that was quite cool?
I mean, as far as biophilic design goes, I think that the hospital in Singapore really just says it all. The original sort of, I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but it's the original biophilic hospital. I think it's Ken Fuat, something like that. Okay. And to me, the way that they went in there very consciously, planting gardens, and gardens are, the community comes in to do these gardens, and then the food goes to the people that are in the hospital, and the beds are put next to the windows, which are put next to all the plants, and their healing rates they're much higher than normal hospitals. It's just common sense that if you're in a hospital, you're eating fresh food from a garden that's being made, by the local community, and your bed is next to a garden, and you're looking out the window at the sun and the sky and these plants and trees, and they've increased all of the bird populations, they've increased the fish populations, all on the hospital grounds, and the people are coming in from the community to be part of all of this. Of course, it's like all this life, coming into this place where there's ill people. And it's making them heal faster. Of course, it's going to make them heal faster. I mean, it's like, you go to the Plymouth, the Derriford Hospital here in Plymouth, it looks like a sausage factory. I mean, it's just horrible. It's like, the last place you'd want to give birth to something, or the last place you'd want to be ill, or, you know, try and recover from something, because it's just light wells that, you know, nothing is living in, you know. So it's just it's definitely, to me, that all of that, you know, says so much about biophilic design. And you've got people like the Terrapin Green practice in west coast of the United States. They're doing loads and loads of studies, you know, showing how if you design this way, it's better for the environment, it's better for the people. It's, you know, it's just, again, it's not rocket science. It's really common sense. But because we're also connected to our computers, I was in another talk and was with Dusty, and this far away so close thing where nature itself, we're so close to it, it's just on the other side of this window. It's literally just on the other side of a piece of glass, so it's really, really close. But we're so inside our computers, it's really, really far away, you know? So some people will just be on this box, this plastic box, for 80–90% of their life. They'll go into a box and they'll stare into a box. And what's on the other side of the window is it becomes unreal, basically. And they get ill, you know, and you know, so that's obvious. And you know, the stuff in Kellert stuff as well, you know, it's these huge panning shots of from the film that they did about biophilic architecture, the life of architecture. You know, and you see these panoramic shots of New York City where it's glass box after glass box after glass box with no ventilation that's natural. You can understand what, you know, how things need to change. So anyway, I'm going off.
No, it's you know, you're completely right. I mean that's why I said that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I witnessed the difference that even a printed view of nature, which was printed on this aluminium stuff, you know, chemical resistant, so I knew I could take it into an isolation unit. But I saw firsthand that the view of beautiful trees, another one of waterscape, you know, basically helped my mother get better. You know, her blood pressure came down, all this sort of stuff. You know, it was like, hang on a minute, there's definitely something in this. And I went off and read Ulrich's study, and then I went off and done everything else, and that's why I set this up. But I mean, I do have to look at this hospital in Singapore. Someone else mentioned about it, and I haven't looked at it yet, so I'm going to have to go away and Google it and find the link. But yeah, just like you're saying, I mean, to be surrounded, if you're sick, to be surrounded by energy and life and positivity. I mean, we all know that what we see affects how we are. You know, if you're surrounded by negative things and drab things, we know, we've had studies on it. We know that it affects our brains and brings us down. You're surrounded by positivity and life and energy, and it's just it's going to infect us in a good way. So you know, and fresh food. I mean, the healing power of food. I mean, I'm really interested in, like, you know, certain, I mean, I drive my partner mad because I'm like, oh, you know, that's got a little bit of calcium in it, and that's got a bit, you know, a nut has got, you know, this bit of protein, this got this, and it's got vitamin A and blah blah blah. I'm sure it's driving everyone nuts, but anyway, it is what it is. But I think there's just so much more that we you know, we were, you know, I mean, you know, Dr. Sally Augustin, you know, we were brought up on lives on the plains, and we haven't really changed that much. We were born to be in nature. We're born to be part of it. We were born, and we shut ourselves away from it. We get sick, you know. So I think what you're doing, Robert, is just absolutely wonderful, because you're passionate about what you're doing. You're speaking about it. You're designing better places and better spaces for people. I think it's really wonderful, and your backstory as well, where you've come from and where you're going to as well. And please write that book. Anyway, I'm just going to say that. Just put it out there. You got to just write that book, because I want to know. I want to read these 700 pages of your journal. I mean, what do you think for? I mean, if you know, like, if cities, you know, city planners or council people or construction or anybody in manufacturing, whatever, go, well, you know, what 4 things should cities be doing to bring, you know, sort of nature and biophilic design into their strategy? which would have the biggest impact on sort of people, place, and the environment? What do you think they, for possible things could
Yeah.
be?
I mean, I think I'm struggle with this a little bit, but basically, what we were saying before, which was trying to get people, Buckminster Fuller, what he did, and was he did a big study on the Earth, and he called the Earth a spaceship Earth. That we're all on this big spaceship, and he was very much an engineer, and he was sort of like, okay, if you think of it as a spaceship, are there enough resources here for everybody? Is there enough here for everybody? And he proved that there's enough water, there's enough food, there is enough everything, and he proved that, in his book, and so, if we can just sort of work with what we've got, and a caretaking, gratitude way for nature, that I think with the four things, that's got to be sort of the basic thing. It's like if the people in the cities can really, if somehow we can get that message across, that's the sort of the baseline. The other thing is the Biophilic Cities network, which is amazing, and was started in the United States. I think they've got 60 or 80 cities on it already. Trying to get Plymouth on the Biophilic Cities network, because they can learn from other coastal cities about how they're dealing with the loss of the biodiversity, how they're dealing with flooding, how they're dealing with all of these issues. When cities invest in biophilic design, they're healthier, the education is better, they're happier. It's when you bring nature back into the city, it's a win-win for for cities. So the Biophilic Cities network would be the second thing. Third thing would be green roofs. Because green roofs are just sort of a really basic thing that most cities can do relatively in a cost-effective way. Mm-hmm. To bring, they help with the biodiversity, and they help with the cooling of the building itself, and also the cooling of the city itself during the summertime. And they make really great places as well for people to hang out at the top of the building where all the views are. And then I think the other thing, which I put down in one of my talks recently, which was I think that everybody involved in design and construction, everybody that's because I mean, nowadays you've got the self-builders that are building their own houses. You've got the planners that are building things. You've got structural engineers that are building things. Yeah. I mean, you've got TV people that are building. Everybody's building stuff in the landscape and in nature. But what I'm trying to get across is this idea that what happened recently with me is I got a call from somebody who had bought an island in the Bahamas, a virgin island in the Bahamas, and wanted to put 2,000 houses on this island in the Bahamas, make them biophilic. And he sent me this photo of this island, and it's like a beautiful tropical island, untouched, with an airstrip on it. And the really, good person. Don't take anything negative from this, but what he said in one of his communications was, this is the canvas that we have to work on. This is it's an untouched, it's a piece of a blank sheet of paper. And I think this blank sheet of paper approach is I had that when I was in architecture school. They give you a 40-story building to do, or a museum, or a university building, or some huge project, blank piece of paper and design a building, you know? No, it's not a blank piece of paper. That's a place somewhere. There are birds there. There are things living in the soil. There's a sky. There's a sun that comes up and goes down. There's, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And you know, in architecture school, you do talk about the site and you do learn about the sun. But this idea of that I really do think things have to stop is when you go into somebody's office and they want you to design a house and there's no site plan and there's no trees, and if there are trees, they're all, we'll just get rid of those. No thought about the birds, no thought about what's connected with the trees. If you look at an oak tree, it's got like 3,000 different types of life forms that are clinging to that oak tree. So that whole way of designing it's got to go. It's got to completely go. This idea that when you have a site, it's just a blank piece of paper. It's not a blank piece of paper. It's something that's alive and it's got meaning to nature there, and it should have meaning to you as a person as well. So so that's my fourth thing.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Like you're saying, you know, it's not a blank canvas, it's not a blank piece of paper. There's a whole life there. There's a whole life that's teeming in any environment where you put it, even if they're little bugs on the, you know, on the concrete or something even, you know, but you're starting somewhere from scratch and you've got trees, you plant around them, you know, or use them or move them, or don't know, just incorporate it in the building. You know, why not create something that's more organic and, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to cost more if you're thinking cleverly with all the construction work and things that we can do and the materials that we have access to and the CAD drawings and all that sort of pre-planning stuff that we can be so clever now. Before we even put a spade in the ground, you know, we can do so much. I mean, from that point of view, actually, maybe we could just talk. I mean, there's a planning reform that's going to come up in the UK. So listeners, I don't know if you know this, and whether it's I don't know what the impact's going to be, but I really hope. I mean, my thing is that I hope that every kind of planner. I've always had this. I've had like many arguments with different town planners and people who are in surveying, and just about from a town planning point of view, the actual planning department should be more emotionally involved, I think, actually, in order to protect the world that's around them. I mean, sometimes the planners don't come from the area, so for them it is just a box ticking thing, and it's but you know, there's ancient woodland and, you know, hedgerows and the wildlife corridors that we need to allow animals to, you know, run between the other, even like creating, you know, stupid thing like people say, you know, make sure there's a little hole in your fence so the hedgehogs can, you know, nip between and get back to their home, you know, and don't block it off. Just stuff like that, you know, just on a bigger scale. We should be doing that in cities. We should be creating that. So do you think this new planning reform is going to be helping our planet?
I think it's a positive thing, and there's a place for biophilic design there. There's also a place with the proper way to develop a greenbelt land, so that, you know, if people are trying to develop greenbelt land, there is a way to still build buildings that where you can protect nature and enhance nature. And if you look at the green plot ratio, the green plot ratio is for instance, there's a hotel in, I think it's Singapore, called Okasia, and or Ocasia. I don't know how to pronounce that one either. But basically it's a multi-story hotel, and they've basically covered it in plants. And you can think whatever you like about the design, but the fact of the matter is they took a brownfield site and they increased the animal and plant life by over 1,000%. And so you can be at on the 20th floor of in your hotel room, and, you know, people are talking about squirrels walking by, you know, the balcony and the window, and birds and all of this kind of thing. And the reality of it is, it's taken a brownfield site and it's turned it into a vertical forest. And I'm sure that some people are going to say, oh, that's greenwashing, or it's not really a forest, but it is bringing life into the city. and it's doing positive things where before there was just concrete there. And you know, Stefano Bolero is doing this all over the world. He's got projects all over the world with the high rises and the trees and the buildings and everything. And he's doing it at cost. You know, so there's one of them that's in Milan, and right across the street is a social housing project, and they both cost the same. They were both the same cost to build, and the rent is the same. So the people that are paying the rent in the social housing, they could be just as easily living in the tree-covered Stefano Bolero, you know, building. It is doable. All of this stuff is doable. People always sort of scoff at it, especially architects. But you know, I think that the main thing is we got to fight the good fight of trying to protect and enhance nature where we can. You know, sure, there's a whole group of people which are sort of saying it's too late. We've passed the tipping point. You know, what's the point of it all? But I believe also, like in the Half Earth project, which you know, where they're trying to basically put aside areas of the earth to maintain the biodiversity and everything. And that's really the fight worth fighting for, and to try and, you know, contribute to all of that. I think is the way forward for architecture. And it's that architecture is it's, you know, especially with my background with Fehn and Piano and people like that, it's funny because with biophilic architecture, you might be achieving, you know, 1,000%, 1,000% on your green plot ratio, right? But if you've done a really bad building architecturally, it's going to end up being torn down because nobody's going to be there. So it isn't, the architecture is still really, really important. And it's sort of like passive house. You know, I have friends that do passive house. If the passive house isn't well designed, I'm sorry, it's nobody's going to want to use it. No, it's going to be torn down. And it's sort of the same thing. It's just because it's biophilic doesn't mean it's good all the time. And, you know, just the same thing with passive house or even a hemp building or, you know, whatever you want to talk about, it still needs to be well designed.
Yeah.
And sometimes people forget that.
Yeah. Like you say, you still need the designer eye. You still need all these things to pull together to create things of beauty.
Yeah.
You know, it's all the symbiotic relationship that we have with life and living and nature and everything else. But yeah, you're right, to be able to still be able to design properly and beautifully and aesthetically is also fundamental to creating better environments, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I do think that the work that's happening in Singapore, and there's some practices in Vietnam as well that are doing spectacular architecture that is, you know, combining the two things. And their engineers, like Trans-Solar is an engineering practice in Germany. Fantastic work where they're doing passive ventilation and they're doing these green designs in conjunction with offices like Stefano Bolero. And if you go to the Trans-Solar website, it's amazing what the biophilic work that they're doing, and also the way that they're limiting carbon and in the way they're thinking about the whole process. So there are people out there doing just amazing, really big projects which are changing the world, you know. So
yeah, wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I know you're going to be, and I think you should be giving yourself a plug, because you're going to be at Future Build at Excel March, between the 1st and the 3rd of March, and you're going to be on stand B78, as we said.
Yes.
B for biophilic, so B78.
I'll be at the Future Build show at the Excel Center, and happy to speak with anybody who wants to talk about biophilic design or wants to talk about a project that they have in mind. We look at everything from community projects with absolutely no budget, literally done one with a zero budget, to bigger, much bigger things that have really bigger budgets. I'm going to be trying on the Cura website to put together more of a resources a package, which will help people with sort of the architecture side of things.
Lovely.
And biophilic design.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's about it.
Lovely. Yeah. I was gonna say, if there's anything else you want to say, or because I want to ask you that my final magic question that I ask everybody. So speak now before I launch into this, because okay. I was going to say forever hold your peace, but no, I'm going to get you back on. So anything else you'd like to add, or shall I ask you that last question?
Yeah, ask me the last question, I think. Yeah.
Okay then. Well, regular listeners to the podcast will know that I ask everybody on these podcasts, if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
I have to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, no pressure.
I mean, I think that if the cities would have more nature happening in the cities, and then the other thing is just a world in general where people don't think of nature as a resource. Where in their daily life, their day-to-day life, they're engaged with the natural world, and in a way, it's sort of like fighting this plastic box that we're all sort of staring into. And so it would be a world where we're outside and we're engaged in nature, and where the sky and the horizon and then thinking about the ocean and things like this, where they have a place in our life. It really sort of goes back to the birthright thing, because what my idea was about birthright was that, which is a little bit different from Stefan Kellert's. It was that part of being human is sitting around a fire or going to the beach and being able to see that horizon, which stretches out forever, the way the sky touches the water, the way the water touches the sand, that sort of edge. And our relationship with the trees and the plants and all of this kind of stuff is what makes us human. If you take a person and you put them in a space capsule and they're out there in space, I think you can very easily say that's not the human experience. That's not who we are. You can't separate us from this earth. And part of being born and going through the whole process of life and then dying is we're connected. We're connected with all of this stuff out here, and it's got to be valued. We got to start valuing what we're part of. So that better world would be that, it would be that. I guess this is ending it on sort of a hippie note, but there are people around that where you can see this starting to happen in places all around the world, where people are valuing the earth and the nature, and the animals. And it's coming out in the most extraordinary ways. I sometimes I see these kids that I call them kids, but they're in their 20s, 20s and 30s, kids, like, my daughter's age. And they are engaging with the earth in this way, and they're seeing it this way, and they're using that language, and it's coming out in the music, it's coming out in the art, it's coming out in the culture. So I really think that there, when things look bleak, you can get strength from a lot of that. So there is good stuff happening. That's what I would say.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.